is like one of the main topics in philosophy. And here's Nietzsche talking about this. And the reason I brought in the Steven Pinker book is because he's especially upset with Nietzsche. And I thought I'd read, it would have been smart had I actually marked out the spot, right? And is there an index? No. So I've got to look through. I'll read this section, by the way. I was showing this to a couple people. I think Pinker is going to be in trouble with lots of folks. But this is regarding existential threats. He says, there's no law of complex systems that says that intelligent agents must turn into ruthless conquistadors. Indeed, we know of one highly advanced form of intelligence that evolved without this defect. They're called women. Is that irritating, or is that going to... It's not politically correct, is it?
A joke.
There we go. There's some folks.
Whew.
That, how angry are you at this?
Saying
There,
Yeah, for someone who has a mullet like that, you'd think he'd be a little more liberal. What the hell?
Wait, can I see his face?
He has
I don't
this
know
really,
if
Oh.
really cool, curly head of hair.
He's philosopher.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, he's rocking it, but
Yeah, that's really cool.
I'm not sure how I feel about it anymore. Wow. Okay,
Sorry.
that's fine.
No, I'm not really sorry when I say that.
Yeah.
I just...
Whatever it is.
Well, he's just saying women are intelligent and not overly violent. Is somewhat what he's saying.
So...
I'll have to hear
Let me
it
see if
again.
I could find some...
Yeah, I
He's
feel like
got...
that's not exactly what he was saying.
No, I'm on. I don't even. I went over my head. I didn't hear it.
I wanted to find the quotes she has from...
How'd they say the whole Nietzsche and God thing now? Like, God's still alive, Nietzsche's not, or something like that?
Oh, the joke?
Yeah.
Typical, would be like a sign, somebody scrawled on the wall or something, God is dead.
Yeah.
And then sign it Nietzsche, because that's a quote from Nietzsche. But then under that would be, Nietzsche is dead, God. Because actually that is true.
Yeah.
Nietzsche's dead.
Yeah, no, I like that.
But he's shoot.
I have one of his books. I never forget where it
He
was.
quotes Amy Schumer in this
Oh,
book.
Really?
You familiar with Amy Schumer?
Yeah.
The sense of spirituality is considered in a video sketch by the comedian Amy Schumer called The Universe. It opens with the science popularizer Bill Nye standing against a backdrop of stars and galaxies. Nye. The universe. For centuries, humankind has strived to understand this vast expanse of energy, gas, and dust. In recent years, a stunning breakthrough has been made in our concept of what the universe is for. Zoom to the Earth's surface and then to a yogurt shop in which two young women are chatting. First woman. So, I was texting while I was driving. Up the question mark. Up speech, right? Right.
Okay.
You know how to do that. While I was driving, and I ended up taking a wrong turn that took me directly past a vitamin shop. And I was just like, this is totally the universe telling me I should be taking calcium.
Stop.
Nye. Scientists once believed the universe was a chaotic collection of matter. We now know that the universe is essentially a force sending cosmic guidance to women in their 20s. Zoom to a gym with Schumer and a friend on exercycles. Schumer. So you know how I've been blanking my married boss for like 6 months? Well, I was starting to get really worried he was never going to leave his wife. But then yesterday in yoga, the girl in front of me was wearing a shirt that just said, chill. And I was just like, this is so the universe telling me, girl, just like keep blanking your married boss. So
What a passage.
She's a great individual.
you know what I mean by blanking. It's the F,
Blocking.
F, F,
Yeah.
Amy Schumer? So atheist, what the heck happened to
Well, that's
the
interesting.
Nietzsche
I like
quotes?
Bob Burnham. He's a good comedian.
I don't like listening to him.
Ah,
at all.
here we go.
He's funny about his.
I don't
Skiffenden.
like his voice.
No.
So,
Yeah,
um,
and also, I mean, some of it's just like crude and dumb.
so what is worthy in life is for a Superman, Ubermensch, literally overman, to transcend good and evil, exert a will to power, and achieve heroic glory. Right. So this is what Nietzsche argued, that it's good to be callous, egotistic, megalomaniacal sociopath. It's good to be that, right? Not good for everyone, of course, but that doesn't matter. The lives of the mass of humanity, the botched and the bungled, the chattering dwarves, the flea beetles count for nothing.
Oh, so he's just diminishing the value of those.
So this is his interpretation of Nietzsche. By
Okay.
I mean, some of these are quotations, botched and the bungled, etc., are in quotes, right? Only through such heroism can the potential of the species be realized and humankind lifted to a higher plane of being. The feats of greatness may not consist, though, in curing disease, feeding the hungry, or bringing about peace, but rather in artistic masterworks and martial conquests, like Wagner's works or Hitler's, Third Reich, etc. Western civilization has gone steadily downhill since the heyday of Homeric Greeks, Aryan warriors, helmeted Vikings, and other manly men. It has been especially corrupted by the slave morality of Christianity, the worship of reason by the Enlightenment, and the liberal movements of the 19th century that sought social reform and shared prosperity. Such effete sentimentality led only to decadence and degeneration. Those who have seen the truth should philosophize with a hammer and give modern civilization the final shove that would bring on the redemptive cataclysm from which a new order would rise. Lest you think I am setting up a straw Ubermensch, here are some quotations from Nietzsche. I abhor the man's vulgarity when he says, what is right for one man is right for another. Do not to others that which you would not that they should do unto you.
Wait, what?
Do
I'm
not
sure what that's supposed to be.
do not to others that which you would not that they should do unto you.
I prefer the modern rendition of that
Yeah.
much better.
Yeah, I could go either. There's several ways you could go that way. The hypothesis here is ignoble to the last degree. It is taken for granted that there is some sort of equivalence in value between my actions and thine. As if, right? Another quote. I do not point to the evil and pain of existence with the finger of reproach, but rather entertain the hope that life may one day become more evil and more full of suffering than it has ever been.
Edgelord Nietzsche.
Again, man shall be trained for war and woman for the recreation of the warrior.
Okay.
Yeah,
All
right.
else is folly. Thou goest to woman, do not forget thy wit.
Who said this one?
Good luck with
Nietzsche.
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 Good
That was
luck.
Nietzsche.
Boy, Nietzsche.
Now, the thing is, this
Wow.
is the same guy that went crazy when he tried to protect the horse that was being whipped in the street and never really recovered, right? So.
Okay, wait a second.
So he just has extreme
He's-
views and like very
Yes,
polar-
Nietzsche.
Empathy.
Very extreme.
Yeah.
Nietzsche is.
He has empathy for a horse, but not a woman.
Well, he was raised by a mother, a grandmother, an aunt, and his sister.
Rather confused.
So he didn't have any male role models. There are people that excuse some of his behaviors because of how heavily dominated his childhood was by all the females in the house.
Oh, no.
Yes.
I read somewhere that he hated women.
That Nietzsche hated women?
That
Nietzsche's
answers
a
my
closet
question.
gay.
It's, well, he was also very upset with the one woman that he fell in love with her, and she liked him as a philosopher, as an instructor, but he was, I think, 20 years older than she was, and
It's like part of the course for these philosophers.
Oh, was this that movie you were showing us a little bit of?
yes.
That was pretty.
Is this the right?
Are you responsible for our patient's despair?
He believes I am.
Really
Where has God gone? I shall tell you. God is dead. We all have killed him. You, and I. After the death of Buddha, his shadow was shown for centuries in caves. A gruesome, gruesome shadow. God will punish you as Satan! But given the way of people, there may still be caves, thank you, for thousands of years in which God's shadow will still be shown. Vanquish the shadow within yourself!
Friedrich Nietzsche Salome, brilliant poet from Russia.
Fascinating lecture to fall on so few ears. Why are people so afraid of you, Professor?
Oh, truth is a fearsome thing.
Why do you say God is dead and not that he never existed?
What do you think?
And God has ceased to be a reckoning force in people's lives.
An interesting interpretation.
But if God is dead, then everything is permitted. No morals, no rules. Without God, who will organize a society? What is the solution to your godless proposition?
From what stars have we dropped down to each other here? Have it as in.
I was immediately attracted to him, seduced by his intellect. We could say so much to each other with half sentences, mere gestures. He became obsessed, proposing marriage after our first meeting. I was attracted to him, but not romantically. I wanted to learn, not to submit. My refusal turned his love into hatred. He wrote me these crazed, insulting letters. Then he wrote about killing himself.
So if I understand you
This
correctly,
movie is fiction, but it's based
you want
on
me to persuade Nietzsche that
true-
his life is worth living,
He really did have
but I
such a
must accomplish
relationship
this
with
without him knowing it.
Psycho.
She's got some
That's crazy.
mommy issues.
That's what?
Yeah.
We have some more issues.
That's one way to put it. That's ridiculous.
What? So, what were your thoughts? That was ridiculous, or that's sick? Did you
Both?
say both? Okay.
Yes.
I don't think she distinguished it.
Like, yeah, we go through heartbreak, but that's...
Well, I mean, I think he already had a couple screws loose.
Well,
I don't think he ever
obviously.
learned how to deal with his emotions at all. I mean,
Like,
not to justify his actions, but I just think that's.
I
where
don't
it comes
know. I understand, like, I guess I don't understand. Like, I get that it's important to have, like, a man and a woman, like, raising a child together in order to, like, have the balance and to see how they act and you learn based off of that and all that. But, I don't know, one would, I mean, was his women-filled household, like, were they abusive towards him? Like, what?
No.
Well, then, how did he not? I don't know. What makes you hate?
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty.
And he
of-
actually
What
had
makes
a
you
pretty
hate?
good relationship with his sister.
Well, then why they hate? That's
I
what I
don't
don't
think
get.
you can just go in and be like, oh, these are the exact reasons he's
Yeah.
this way. You know, we don't have like any information really.
Well,
Past rejections too.
Yeah. Well,
This time,
there's
felt like the person actually cared.
Yeah, but that can happen to anyone.
Yeah, they can have.
That's why I'm confused as to why, like.
I've met a lot of people that freak out like that, though.
Yeah.
1934, a photograph was taken here which epitomised the extraordinary influence of one of the most provocative and uncompromising thinkers of the 19th century. It's an image of Adolf Hitler standing next to the bust of Nietzsche here in Weimar, where the philosopher lived. With chilling eloquence, this tells us what many Nazis believed, that Nietzsche was the brilliant mind, the inspiration behind the terrifying ideologies of the Third Reich. Yet if Nietzsche had been alive to see it, he would have been appalled. His philosophies were being distorted by a regime that stood for so much that he'd have loathed. Nietzsche was one of the most dangerous minds of the 19th century.
Nietzsche thinks we have blood on our hands because we haven't just killed God, we've killed that which gave our lives meaning.
Nietzsche lived in a century in which Europe was witnessing unprecedented change, where the authority of Christianity was being challenged. Radical breakthroughs in science were redefining belief. And thinkers like Freud, Marx, and Nietzsche were suddenly free to unleash ideas that in previous centuries would have seen them burned to the stake. Yet they heralded nothing less than the modern world.
What about his philosophy would have
In
By the way, I
1882,
think
one of
she's
the greatest
fantastic,
minds of the
Bethany
19th
Hughes.
century predicted a crisis. One
Very
that he
sexy.
believed would be without equal on earth,
I think
and which
Bethany
would be
Hughes is
triggered
very
by
sexy.
nothing less than the murder of God.
Makes
God
this-
is
her
dead,
videos are way more
and God
interesting to
remains
watch than-
dead because we have killed him. What was holiest and most powerful of all that the world has yet owned has bled to death under our eyes. Who will wipe the blood from our hands? These are the visceral, challenging words of Friedrich Nietzsche. The crisis that he proclaimed was a wave of disbelief in Christianity that he predicted would crash through Europe. And the raw, brutal language that he chose to describe this death of God is a measure of just how terrifying he thought the consequence would be. For what Nietzsche saw with disturbing prophetic clarity was that without a belief in God, there was no authority for the moral values that had underpinned European society across 2,000 years. He was declaring our freedom from God, our mastery of our own fates. No longer controlled by divine laws, we were now liberated or condemned to create our own values. But what haunted and tormented Nietzsche was his realization that this was a freedom that came at a terrible price. The loss of religious belief would bring with it nothing less than a vacuum of meaning in human existence. It was a crisis that Nietzsche would wrestle with for the rest of his life.
That's interesting.
The childhood of the man who would come to call himself the Antichrist was, with no little irony, one infused with the joy of Christianity. When Nietzsche was just 9 years old, he heard Handel's Messiah for the first time. He said he felt he had to join in the joyful singing of the angels on whose billows of sound Jesus ascended to heaven. The man who had spent his life as an adult with a mission to attack everything that Christianity stood for started off in life as the son of a Lutheran pastor here in the very cradle of Protestant Christianity. Friedrich Wilhelm Nietzsche grew up in the village of Rocken in Prussia, now northern Germany, and as a boy he was passionately pious.
This is the parsonage where Nietzsche was born. His father, Karl Ludwig, had a very simple faith. The household lived and breathed Christianity.
Nietzsche's early years were settled and sheltered. His parents had 2 other children. When he was 2, his sister Elizabeth was born, followed a year later by a brother, Joseph. But in the autumn of 1848, when Friedrich was only 4 years old, his childhood was ripped apart. His father became mentally ill and was diagnosed with a terminal brain disease.
It was a tortuous decline. He went blind and eventually was bedridden. 1 year later, he was dead. An autopsy revealed that a quarter of his brain was missing. This must have been a truly horrific end.
The suffering of his beloved father marked Friedrich for life. As a teenager, he wrote about his father's funeral in this church where he'd once preached. "Oh, never will the deep-throated sound of those bells quit my ear." The organ resounded through the empty spaces of the church.
For Nietzsche, the death of his father posed a profound question. Why had this God, whom his father had so loved and to whom he dedicated his life, punished a good man with such torment?
It was the start of a journey into doubt that would come to define Nietzsche's life. Despite the loss of his father, in 1864, at the age of 20, Nietzsche arrived in Bonn to study theology at the university, contemplating a future as a Lutheran pastor. But it was during his time here that he came under the influence of a controversial new method of studying the Bible, known as biblical criticism.